Welcome to another episode of Timebreaker Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is episode 23 of the podcast, coming back at you week after Batman. We're not going to be talking about Batman, but we're doing the weekly catch-up because we kind of delayed our last episode so that we could talk about it. And so the episode dropped right on release day. So we didn't have box office numbers as we usually do, but we have them now. So Anthony, let's get right into it.
So this weekend, the Batman opened to $134 million here in the U.S. and Canada, and then did an additional $124 overseas for $258 worldwide, which honestly is not bad considering the conflict going on in Russia and, the release getting pulled there and everything else going on in the world. 258 is pretty solid. It even came in above expectations.
Yeah, I've heard lots of things. I've heard it's almost or the biggest one since Spider-Man. It's definitely the biggest of 2022 so far. It's Warner Brothers' biggest hit in a long time, I think. I don't know what their last huge one was, but yeah, it's a good sign for the Batman.
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you what Warner's last big box office draw was because it was just so long ago, and their whole HBO day and day really screwed up their box office numbers. I mean, people are really talking about the fact that in one weekend the Batman made more than Dune did over its entire run last year. So
right.
I mean, it kind of goes to speak to itself on the power of having an exclusive day and date. And on top of that, we're seeing some theaters, and apparently, so I was doing a lot of research on this. This has actually been an issue for years. This is just only now people are starting to notice, but apparently other cinema chains like Cinemark and Regal have been increasing opening weekend tickets for actually quite a while. I think for the last 2 years they've been doing that. So, but now AMC's now joined in on this. I'm not sure if this is every showing of the Batman or if it's just opening weekend. I can't get a clear answer on how long they're going to hike the price of this. But I mean, speaking of price hikes and the theatrical experience, it kind of leads into our subject today because we're going to be talking about the streaming wars.
Yeah, to your previous point, didn't Harkins do a special engagement or something for the new big releases? They just made them more expensive, those opening weekends on the evening showings.
I don't believe Harkins is charging any more than anyone else. They do the same thing everyone else does. They charge a matinee price, and then they charge an adult price of a charge at night. And I mean, I guess we can kind of start with, what's kind of caused this switch to streaming. I personally believe it's a lot of just ticket prices have gone up. There's a lot of fees associated with going to the movies. You have to buy some drinks. You have to buy some popcorn, especially if you bring more than just yourself. You're looking at a decent chunk of change being out. And on top of that, I know that for me, the more we've swapped to this reserved seating, this exclusive event, the more the convenience fee of it, it doesn't feel convenient. I mean, does that make sense? It doesn't feel convenient, and the fact I'm getting charged for it when it's practically required is kind of insulting.
Yeah, and to go off what you said, if you're a family, a huge family, or you got a couple kids, this whole going out to the movies is a pretty expensive ordeal, and not something that the average movie consumer can do every weekend. We usually see the average moviegoer maybe once a month, or especially if they're not even an avid moviegoer, we'll see them a couple times in the summer, and then they'll see their one or two at Christmas, right? Anthony and I are kind of the minority where we're going a lot, and then also to you. Because you go more than me, I would have to imagine if you didn't have your subscription or to your the AMC thing or whatever, you wouldn't be going as much if you had to pay per ticket, right?
Yeah, that was a really big changing moment for me, especially just the added cost of so I went from having just myself going to the movies to having a second person, and just the additional cost. You're looking at least where we live, we were looking at $15 a ticket, roughly, unless you can somehow get in before, I think it's 3 o'clock. It's really, really early, at least for my schedule. That's early to try and go to the movies. And then on top of that, so you're paying $15 for the ticket. $2 for each person for the convenience fee. So you're looking at $34 just in tickets, roughly. And that's just your basic movie, too. And, Harkins is really like one of the only theaters that has their loyalty cup. But even with that, those have went from $1 less than 10 years ago. Now they're $2, which I understand it sounds small, but, that's a big increase from what it used to be. So that's $4 right there. And then if you don't have their popcorn program, popcorn's one up at Harkins. So on an average visit, I think I was spending somewhere close to $50 for two people. And so for me to then swap over to AMC and their A-list program, I'm paying $40 in tickets, and then typically I share a drink with my girlfriend each time we go. So we're spending $6 on that, but our tickets are a flat rate. And especially if you look at AMC prices, they're a lot more than Harkins. You're looking at about $18 for Dolby Cinema and IMAX there, and about $15 to $14 for an average regular screening.
Right, and I was gonna say that too, like on top of that cost, and that's saying like because Harkins and being here in Arizona, like Harkins is generally like a cheaper going than to an AMC, which is a national theater chain. So like even then we're saving money, and it's still like gone up to be like $50 an outing for multiple people, and yeah, that just comes with the inflation and what's going on in the world and just price increases, and the pandemic didn't help that at all. And I think I saw like a stat or something, like I think opening weekend it's like 60-40, like 60% of the revenue goes to the studio, 40 goes to the theater, and then it, like second weekend it'll like go 50-50, and then it'll flop, and then like when it's later it's more towards the theater and then less towards the studio. So that's why like these movies are so front heavy. But like if you see like movies like like Avatar, Black Panther, like they did a lot for movie theater chains because of like how long the longevity of the run was, and majority of that was going towards the actual theater chain.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily to say that the theatrical experience needs to be this very dragged out, we're like 16-week run. That is a lot of time for any movie to be in theaters. But it's the fact that, pre 2020, it was a fairly consistent schedule. The problem started becoming was, the more and more of these big popcorn flicks took over as the sole income for these theaters, the more and more they had to rely on them. When your Avengers Endgames are making 800 million domestic, but your average release that isn't a big hit is making under 100, you kind of start to see where the issue lies, because now you're solely relying on one to four movies a year for probably your entire year. And so, I understand the switch to streaming, and streaming started coming around Netflix I think first launched in 2010.
I don't know. It's been a while actually, and like we've seen a lot of these things evolve. Disney Plus only came out a couple years ago, and there was like a long time where we were even like wondering if that was ever going to be a thing, and then it finally came to fruition a couple years ago. And there's like been a huge battle between all these different services. I think like at the beginning it was really just like Netflix and Hulu, and then like Amazon got in the mix, and like those were kind of like the three big contenders, and then it's only till recently where we had like Apple, Peacock, Stars, Discovery, Paramount, all these other like smaller chains coming up with their own exclusive streaming platforms. That's really making things very congested and contentious right now.
Well, yeah, and especially when studios like Netflix are, well, even not even a studio, but a company that like Netflix is investing the amount of money they're putting in. I mean, yeah, and this is how like Netflix's prices keep going to ridiculous numbers. They're spending billions of dollars on content a year, and the only way to make that money back is literally through subscriptions. And if they lose any subscriptions, what do they need to do? Hike the price to pretty much compensate for losing them. And then when you increase prices, now you lose even more. And honestly, I've heard the argument several times that no streaming service is profitable, and they all say, well, in 5 years we'll be profitable, but when does the content end? I mean, when does creating new content get to slow down? Because we've never seen that. No streaming service has been able to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. And like that's the weird thing about me that I don't really buy into like the streaming service or don't get them completely. You know, like we talked earlier on the show, we talked the box office numbers of the Batman, right? Like with all these theatrical releases, we can track the numbers and we know the budget and we can see if it's a profitable movie, if it's a success. You know, with these Netflix or streaming movies, we don't know the budget, although it's probably really high if you look at some of these movies, and then we don't know how much a view counts or how much like new subscribers the movie attracted and how much that converts into revenue. So it's really hard for just me and in general and people in general to gauge whether or not these movies are a success, you know, because like it's cool that like Red Notice was like their most viewed movie or whatever. But like if you put Red Notice in the theater, like would it do that good? Like I don't think so. Like so that's just a weird thing for me where I just don't know how to gauge the quality of these movies and how well they're actually doing for the service.
Yeah, and I've started to see Netflix, they're kind of expanding a little bit. They're kind of experimenting. They're trying to see, what can they do with these movies? Because right now, or at least until very recently, not a single Netflix movie was in theaters. I think the first one was the Breaking Bad movie, El Camino, back in 2018, and that was like what, in 50 theaters. I mean, it was a really small amount of theaters, and that was it. Then you never saw another Netflix movie. All of a sudden 2020 hits, and all of a sudden now we're starting to see, a lot more movies, and they're going to theaters. But my point is that they go to theater for like a week, and they go like a week before they stream too. And I think that is what hurts it, because, unless you're someone like me who's a super big Zack Snyder fan, you're not going to go and pay $15 when it'll literally be out next Friday.
Right, and I don't think those releases are for profit or they're for to get people to go see them. It's more, I think, if it's just a promotional thing, or if it's a critic thing, they'll get the press in there, or it's just like, and it's like an extra added thing on top. Like I don't think they're calculating or banking on that, making their bank. It's more just like this is what's coming out, and we want to put it out early before it hits the streaming service.
Yeah, I still believe though that it's a super interesting move on their part, and it's an interesting move in general because, why not just release these movies as a theatrical experience for a month and then release them? I'm not saying that they need the money, but it couldn't hurt. And I mean, look at 90% of movies. They make a majority of their money in their first 4 weeks. And so, it might only be $50 million, but like $50 million, $50 million, it's nothing to really sweat over.
That's true. I also don't know the logistics of like how much it costs to like put these out into the theaters and get them promoted to they're in the theater chains or whatnot. Like I guarantee it's a lot cheaper and like simpler just to just put it out there on Netflix or whatever and just like have a little ad rolling.
Well,
there.
The way to think about it though is that Netflix as a service, Disney Plus as a service, Hulu as a service. You're already subscribed. And they can just slap it in your face, coming to Netflix on this date, going to theaters on this date. They don't even have to advertise it, because if you see it on there and they say it's coming out in a month, but if you want to see it today, you can.
Yeah, no, I'm saying like that's more like as a promotional tool for people that aren't in the service already.
Right.
If you're trying to expand, you spent the money, on Army of the Dead. You want to appease the Zack Snyder fans. You want to get people that aren't really in for all the Netflix. You want them to go see what you have to offer and maybe buy into Netflix. So then you'd have to spend a little bit of money to put it out into AMC trailers and ads and all this stuff to get the people that aren't on Netflix to go see the movie in the theater and be like, hey, I'll go get Netflix now.
Yeah, that's true. So moving on from just the general idea of movies on a streaming service, I think the bigger conversation here is, what happens when all of these streaming services come out at once, which is kind of what we've seen is, we had like you were saying, we had our three big contenders. We had Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu, and they were, the main three for a very long time. And I've heard the argument several times from several people, and they say, what happened to Netflix? Why is Netflix not the way I remember it? Why is it not as good as it used to be? And Netflix's success rides a lot on the fact that they rode on a lot of content that wasn't theirs. And they were just able to get the exclusive streaming rights when no company knew what it was worth.
Right. You saw like all these big shows and big pieces and big films that were streaming on Netflix, like The Office is a big example. And like that was the only place where you could go to see that content. And now like all these individual studios, they're reclaiming their IPs, launching their own streaming services, and it's taking away from, the big three, and it's forcing them to make their own content. Like you said, they're spending billions of dollars to do this. I think this is the second year in a row where Netflix has promised a new piece of content every week, which props to them. Good for you. Whether it's good or not, that's up to everybody to decide. But yeah, so it's definitely like shaping with the evolution or with the emergence of these newer streaming services from all these studios. It's definitely forcing the hand of the older streaming services to like buckle down and make their own stuff and not rely on all this third party content.
Yeah, and a lot of people were just like, no one's going to be able to come in, no one's going to be able to enter this streaming landscape and get towards the top. And then, example being Disney Plus. Disney Plus launched, and I'm not saying it's going to beat Netflix or that it's at Netflix levels yet, but it's only been out for 2.5 years at this point, and it has well over 100 million subscribers. So
it's definitely made an impact.
It's kind of a testament to itself. And honestly, we might not always be in love with the content they're releasing, but I'd say it's arguably better than 90% of content that Netflix is making, because I guarantee 90% of content Netflix makes, because when people think of Netflix, you think of just their main good shows, where Disney really doesn't have anything outside of their main shows. They're not just releasing content to release content. I mean, I know that there is some on there if you want to go find it, but their big stuff, I feel like it comes out more frequently than Netflix.
Yeah, but the thing I'll say about that is that we're kind of like biased because like all the content that Disney is releasing is stuff we already bought into from existing IPs we were already fans of. We're not here watching any new Disney content that they're putting out on Disney Plus. Like I did not watch The World According to Jeff Goldblum. Like I did not watch The Mighty Ducks, although I should have watched The Mighty Ducks. So we're already like I was gonna watch the Marvel stuff regardless wherever it was because it's the Marvel stuff. I was gonna watch Star Wars because it's freaking Star Wars, and it's just like it's Disney's fault because that they put themselves in an advantageous spot that they own the rights to all those things, and Netflix doesn't, and we're seeing that even now when the Marvel show's getting pulled from Netflix and putting on Disney Plus. And then on top of that, I think it's also because Netflix just has so much, like you said, like they're just putting out everything and anything they can, which is you're going to get hits or misses versus, something like an HBO, which has always historically been a more prestigious streaming service, of the highest quality. And that's also reflected in their price and, how they've been ran for years, even before this whole streaming wars thing was a thing.
Yeah.
So,
it's definitely interesting. I remember Bob Iger talking about the fact that Disney Plus was going to go with quality over quantity, and it's the exact opposite of what Netflix's strategy is. Netflix's strategy is quantity. They try to release as much content as feasibly possible to keep you subscribed. I mean, what would happen if Netflix went, let's say, 3 months with no content? For a lot of people, at least a lot of people I've heard from that say they watch Netflix on a constant, they would probably unsubscribe because they are watching a ton of the new stuff. I don't know how anyone has time for it, but they do.
Right, and I think it's just a different, like you said, different approach. Like, Netflix definitely has a lot wider of a demographic because they have that quantity of content that, they can span whoever has something interested in them. Like there's dating shows, there's, horror shows, there's like all these different things. There's so much foreign content too on Netflix that's killing it recently. Versus, Disney, like if you like Star Wars, you like you like Marvel, you cool. If you're anybody else, like, we don't really got you. So it's definitely, you're picking your approach there depending on your streaming service.
Yeah, and I also just think that a lot of the newer services kind of came out They came out like kicking. Disney, I mean, look at Disney Plus, the way it launched. Disney Plus launched with 4K HDR for $6.99. It was an additional add-on. It came with, I believe 4 streams at once. And it was kind of just a middle finger at Netflix, like literally pointed right at them, because to get the same quality stream and the same amount of streams, you would have to be on Netflix's highest tier, which is nowadays priced at $20, but at the time I believe it was still $16 or $17. So you're paying double to get that 4K stream. And even today, your standard Netflix package is $9.99, and yet it doesn't even include your basic 1080p, which is, for 2022, pretty bad. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that they don't make money on it, because I guarantee there's a ton of people that are on it. But the fact that we're still releasing 480p streams and you're charging $10 a month is kind of insane.
Okay, what I'll say to that is it's insane for us because I know for a fact, my family, lots of people, our generation, anybody else, you go anywhere on campus, on your school, whatever, you're going to get a whole bunch of people our age that are consuming Netflix like no other on their phone, and they can't even tell the difference in quality.
I would argue that regardless of where you watch it, and this is just a testament to both formats. So if you look at a DVD to a Blu-ray, you can tell a difference. Blu-ray to 4K is a little harder. I feel it's the same with streaming. Standard definition stream to HD stream is a pretty drastic difference, where an HD stream to a 4K stream, I feel like for any jumps outside of that 1080p jump, yes, it's going to take you pretty much be able to recognize the difference or know what you're looking for, if that makes sense. But on a 480p stream, you're dealing with so much compression at that point, and there's so little resolution to make up for it, that arguably a 1080p stream is just going to be like stupidly cleaner.
Yeah, but I just don't know if anybody like cares or like notices it. We're living on a generation that is always on the digital device, that has always have to deal with buffering and streaming and compression. And like I used to go to dorm rooms, they didn't have DVD players, they didn't know anything. They just take the laptop, plug that HDMI cable, put it into the laptop, and they just stream whatever on the TV. So you're getting like double compression. It's like, oh my gosh, but that's just what they do, and they don't care. They just consume the content. And how deep are these people like, diving into the content anyways? Like they're just kind of, Netflix is a really good thing to have like in the background, or just like having, you're on your phone or you're doing assignments and you just have it playing. We're not like studying it like I'm studying my 4K Blade Runner 2049 disc,
Yeah, I get where you're coming from.
And so that allows them to appease to this huge audience, which Netflix has done with ease.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really talk a lot about DVD here, but it still sells ridiculously well. For what it is. Why do you say that
like it's such a bad...
Dude, we don't talk about DVDs. Like, we'll talk about a Blu-ray, we'll talk about a 4K. We do not really ever mention a DVD. I mean, when was the last time you bought a DVD?
Oh, bought? Yeah, no.
I mean, I can tell you what the last DVD I bought was, but I have a reason for it.
No, I don't buy DVDs.
Like, the last DVD I bought was Tower of Terror, and that is only because it is only on DVD. And I just wanted a copy of it. And so that was my only way to do it.
Yeah, no. I don't. DVD is banished from my collection.
Yeah, same as me. It like sits all awkwardly because it's so much taller.
Like, I can't tell you how excited I am that I won't have to watch Godfather on DVD in a couple weeks here.
Yeah, and just going more into the streaming stuff, I feel like HBO came out with a huge disadvantage, and that was definitely its price.
Well, yeah, I think that's because they're going off of like their previous model, and that's just, they assumed it was like a 1-to-1 transition.
Right, and when Game of Thrones was still airing, HBO was all the rage and stuff, and so you can kind of,
they could have charged whatever for people,
right,
and they would have bought that.
But now in an era of HBO where there's not Game of Thrones, it's very interesting to see this $15 charge. And I guess what you could also look at was Warner Bros. Giving up, like literally sacrificing their entire 2021 theatrical slate to streaming, giving up Chris Nolan for this experiment that I honestly say probably wasn't worth it. I mean, did it keep their subscribers happy? Probably. Did it keep investors happy? Not really. I heard a handful of times that investors weren't happy, and I know that the crews on these movies weren't happy that they were going streaming.
Right. Yeah.
And like, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not a part of the problem that happened with that HBO slate, because I did watch Wonder Woman 1984 because that was like in the peak of the Christmas 2020 when like cases were going rampant, and I just was not willing to go sit in the theater, so I did watch that. That was the only one though that I watched on HBO Max.
I'm not a part of the problem. I went and watched that movie.
Gross, thumbs down.
Yeah. Nah. Yeah. Skip it if you haven't already. But yeah. I do not have HBO to this day. Maybe when House of Dragon comes out, and yeah. But I mean, that's not to say, because HBO still is putting out super high quality content. You know, I haven't watched Succession, but apparently that's like all the rave right now. If you're into that, we're getting House of Dragon, huge budget fantasy piece. They just released Peacemaker, and everybody says it's way better than the Disney Plus Marvel shows. And I kind of believe you. Like, I haven't even watched it, and that's not a high bar to clear for me.
Well, it's like we were talking to Batman. It's just Warner Brothers giving a lot of creative control to some of these creators, and you're kind of getting to see what they're able to do with this freedom. I mean, we saw with Matt Reeves with the Batman, we saw with James Gunn with the Suicide Squad, and that translates hand in hand with the Peacemaker show.
Me with the Dune.
And Dune. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and then they're giving, and then props to Warner, and they're about to get that Discovery money maybe, and and I've heard lots of rumors of all these like spin-offs that they're doing. We got a lot of Dune spin-off shows, we got Arkham spin-off shows, Penguin spin-off shows, rumors all over the place of all this other content that they want to add to HBO Max. So give it a couple years, and they might have a pretty stacked library on their hands.
Yeah, I've been hearing rumors for over a year now that with Discovery coming into the picture, that they are in on Zack Snyder's vision, and they will create the Snyderverse on HBO Max, which,
I wouldn't put it past them.
If that's the only way I can get it, I will accept it. But honestly, Zack Snyder, the way he makes these movies, they are for the theater. Like, just, they are stunning on the screen. And it would be as insulting as watching Dune on your TV at home when you have the option to see it in, your Dolby Cinemas, your IMAX, heck, even a regular theater. It's a day and night difference. And, but, in the age of streaming, we kind of just have to accept it the way it is. I'd love to see The Mandalorian on a big screen, but, I'm limited to what I have at home.
Right. And, to go off of that, that kind of spawns a conversation point that, especially with the pandemic and, with the rise of streaming, we've seen a lot of these bigger, what would have been cinematic hits or, meant for the cinema found a home in Netflix. You talk about The Irishman, huge Martin Scorsese film, only on Netflix. You talk about Knives Out 2, no theatrical, only coming to Netflix. I don't know if it's getting theatrical, it might, but, the first one came out theatrically, that's what I'm trying to say. And the second one's only on Netflix. And it's happening a lot. And, we're getting these other blockbuster-esque movies on these streaming services.
Yeah, what's actually interesting about The Irishman is that pretty much what happened with that movie and how it ended up on Netflix is kind of crazy. Pretty much Scorsese went to, distributors trying to find someone that would pay for the film, but none of them wanted to invest that type of money. He goes to Netflix, and Netflix is all down for it. But, so it is special, this movie specifically, because I believe Scorsese got in the contract that it would run in theaters, I believe 2 or 3 weeks before it hit Netflix, only in theaters for those few weeks.
Right, yeah, and, I think it kind of like that.
Yeah, and it kind of shows the power that some of these content creators, get to have, but that their only option to create said movie is to go with these streaming platforms. And, it's interesting that, you can make a $200 million movie on Netflix, and because you don't need to see the returns on it,
it's take the gamble.
Yeah. But, when you have a $200 million movie like The Batman, it needs to be profitable in order for it to be successful. and it kind of goes into the argument of, how can we judge these streaming services when they don't even have a metric really for themselves?
Right, that's what I was saying earlier today. And, I mean, it's just like, like we see these movies that are only on streaming services, and there could be a potential audience for them. And, if you look at like the way that the Batman was pitched and the way it was made, it definitely could have fallen into one of those categories where it's like Warner Brothers, if there were a different studio, they'd be like, I don't really believe in the vision. I don't want to take the risk. Sorry, we can't suffice and we can't fund this project or whatever. Not to say they'd go somewhere because it's Batman and they own the rights, but it's cool to see that Warner Brothers is one of those studios nowadays, that is putting the filmmaker first and really supporting their vision. I read somewhere recently that one of the, the execs over there is like saying that's how we're moving forward with all the DC movies. And, that's what we're all about. Which I think is the total right direction to go. There's like a whole like DC versus Marvel film, and Marvel is feeling more and more formulaic and the same thing, mind-numbing stuff from Kevin Feige and all the whole team, to build this huge canvas of whatever they got going on. And the trend for these DC films has been very, singular, one by one. These filmmakers are having their vision and their imprint on these films, like you said, with the Suicide Squad, with the Batman, even Shazam, had a very unique tone to it as well. And earlier on with Wonder Woman. So it's good to see that they're going in that direction.
Yeah, and it's definitely interesting. So, there's not a lot of times you get to see a studio completely shift gears, but Warner Brothers has definitely, just look at them back in 2016, they were all in on Snyder's vision. And if Snyder's vision had been on a streaming service like HBO Max, who cares? Who cares if it's 26% on Rotten Tomatoes? Who cares if it only did, let's say, 50 million homes? Because there's no metric of success, they wouldn't have even batted an eye. They would have said, cool, go work on Justice League. But instead, what the theatrical does is that pretty much this didn't make as much money as we wanted. Might have made $800 million, but we wanted $1 billion. So we're going to come in here. We're going to then tell you how to make the next movie. Oh, and then we're just going to fire you because we're really, really, really just not on board with what it is. And we're going to bring in a director that is completely against your entire vision, that is the complete opposite of how you film, the complete opposite of the type of films you make. And we're going to bring him in to finish your film. We're going to slap your name on it. And I think that is probably a bigger disrespect than just putting directed by Joss Whedon. It's the fact that you said it was his film and it's not. And, I'm glad that Warner Brothers has woken up. And, I feel like if HBO Max had been around a few years ago, and if something like, granted, a Batman and Superman movie never would have been on HBO Max to begin with, but hypothetically, if it was, I guarantee they wouldn't have even bat an eye at it.
Or even then, like if it was a couple years ago and they were taking the direction that they were now and they had that same attitude as they did now, we would have got the ultimate cut theatrically.
Yeah, and the ultimate cut is a far superior version of it. So, and that is, I believe that is the version that actually sits on HBO Max today. I don't think the theatrical one sits on there. And, I don't know if we've talked much about the ultimate cut because, we don't really talk about the Snyder stuff that much because I know that Daniel hasn't seen it, so we kind of try to avoid that until he finally sits down and watches that. So,
hey man, I've seen everything but the Justice League.
But yeah, the ultimate cut is like far superior, and to show that it's streaming on HBO Max as the preferred version, it says something. And the fact that HBO was willing to invest $90 million to finish Justice League, I mean, if that were a theatrical release, they would have literally never would have done it. Is pretty much
like making another movie.
Yeah, but because it's a streaming service and it was used as a big marketing push to launch HBO Max, they were all in on it. They're like, yeah, let's spend $90 million because not only do we get this thing that fans have been asking for, but Zack Snyder can promote it. X, Y, and Z can promote it. It promotes our service. Right. And so it's it's essentially like a $90 million ad. Whereas if they had to make it a theatrical experience,
it's a pre-order bonus, dude.
Right. Spending another $90 million on a movie that flopped once is seen as just a really bad investment.
Yeah, like on paper it doesn't look good, but it's done wonders for them, and it's re-sparked this whole Save the Snyderverse movement, on social media, and I mean, who knows with because I know the Discovery people are a lot more open to this sort of thing, and they would have had Dune 2 greenlit a long time ago before it already was. So maybe they might have a different attitude for it. So you never say never these days. We saw Toby and Andrew in Spider-Man 3s. It's never, the book is never closed, I guess, these days.
Yeah, and I think what's kind of interesting about the streaming services is that I feel like streaming services are like actually competing with each other for talent. You see that Ryan Johnson's now working with Netflix, but who says that Ryan Johnson's not going to go work with HBO Max? It's that these directors aren't even confined to where they're at. Like, yes, Zack Snyder has made a choice to work with Netflix, but just like Nolan made a decision to move away from Warner Brothers, if they make him mad, another streamer will take him on. And regardless of us as consumers, we can't sit here and say the streaming wars isn't a good thing, because we're getting a lot of original content we probably never would have seen. I mean, Zack Snyder, and the reason I keep bringing him up is because he has had a lot of experience with Warner Brothers. He's made a lot of movies for them, but he's also had a lot of movies that were rejected by him, and he's just now finally able to bring these out, because when he's at somewhere like Netflix, where pretty much they're all behind him, because he brings his fans with him, on top of the fact that regardless of if just his fans watch it, it is revenue for them because of subscriptions, and it's views for them, and that is their metric of doing well. And so movies that he's been working on since 2006 can now get released because a streamer provided the money where a studio wouldn't.
Yeah, but who talent is not that, or what talent that the studios aren't fighting for?
Kevin Spacey.
No, Benioff and Weiss.
Who?
Too soon? Benioff and Weiss? The Game of Thrones writers, showrunners.
Ooh,
too soon.
That's a rough one.
Remember they had a Star Wars movie? Remember they had a Netflix deal? Oof.
Yeah, I mean, and that situation wasn't HBO's problem. That wasn't anyone's fault except the showrunners. They wanted to be done with Game of Thrones, and so they literally rushed it. HBO literally said publicly, we told him you can have as many seasons, as many episodes, and as big of a budget as you need to complete this. And that was what, they did with that. And, it's a testament to how well received Game of Thrones was, how popular it was, where it was at, where, Warner Brothers / HBO would literally say, we will give you unlimited budget, unlimited episodes. You can do whatever you want, just finish a show for us.
Yeah, it's very rare that you get the blank check and for an original IP. It's kind of original. For your IP to do whatever you want. That's probably like Nolan with Tenet right there, but not anymore. And it's very rare that happens.
I'm not a fan of the streaming wars. And the reason I'll say I'm not a fan of it, regardless of what it brings to town and stuff, one thing I do not like is that it's borderline anti-consumer. Because, there was a day a long time ago where you had The Office, you had Friends, you had South Park, you had, name all these big shows, and they were on one home. And so, to think that you were paying $10 a month then to have all these shows, if you wanted those same shows today, you'd be paying probably, I don't know, I'll estimate somewhere around $50.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from. I have a different viewpoint where, like, I understand like everything you're saying, and it's valid for like those specific legacy pieces, but it's also very pro consumer and pro competitive market versus like you can't be a streaming service anymore and release half-ass content. Because then I'll just go somewhere else. So we're in an area, and it's only going to get worse and more contentious, where we have to compete to have the best of the best content out there. And so as the consumer, you're going to be getting better and better stuff. Hopefully, that's just how markets work. And you get to choose where you put your money.
Yeah, that was definitely going to be my point for it. That's definitely the one downside, is that yes, you lose all these legacy shows, and all these things are not on one home anymore. But on the bright side, there's so much competition that really, I mean, not everyone has every subscription. So really, you do, you know, your money is where your mouth is, and if you don't like the content they're producing, you can just swap to a different service, and you have brand new originals from there, and they are competing against who you just came from. So now they're releasing content on par with the content you were watching on there, and arguably streaming content has just gotten better and better and better and better, where and it does create the argument of what makes the difference between streaming stuff and the theatrical stuff. And I think we're starting to get to a point where you know the difference in actual quality for the actual film is getting pretty close.
The line is definitely very gray, especially like I said with Knives Out 2 coming out. That's a theatrical caliber show. Ryan Johnson is that type of filmmaker, and now it's on Netflix, and so you'll be able to experience that. Whether you're an existing subscriber or if you just want to pay the new membership fee, you can get that along with all the other stuff. Like if you started watching today, you won't be able to watch all of Netflix before you die. Like there's too much stuff, and that's on every platform these days.
Yeah, and I think one of the final points I want to touch on is the evolution that's going on. Maybe that might be happening here on Disney Plus, and that technically will start regardless of if anything else comes after this. But the TVMA Defender shows are all going to Disney Plus, which is a really big deal because Disney, since day one of announcing Disney Plus, it was always a kid-friendly service. TV-14 was the bar. Everything was going to be that or lower. PG-13 was the maximum a movie was going to be. Anything else would go to Hulu. And here we are, a little over 2 years since it launched. And we are getting the first content batch of TVMA content, which, it's a really big deal for a company that pretty much said they weren't going to do this. And I'd love to hear what your take is on it.
Yeah, I think it's a win. Like we've seen Charlie Cox in No Way Home, so bring his Daredevil back is cool, and like we also Vincent D'Onofrio was in Hawkeye, so bring that whole Daredevil world. It has a lot of synergy with all the Disney Plus stuff and the Marvel stuff that they already have. They're high quality shows, though I haven't watched them, but they fit at that tier, and it's a little bit more edgy than the stuff that's already on there, and it adds a different element to it, and it expands the audience. This is a necessary move that Disney probably needed to make, to take that next step if they want more subscribers, and they don't have complete control over Hulu, so this is probably a good home for all that stuff for them to just have creative control over it. And it allows us to fill out the catalog a little bit, and complete stuff. Maybe we see Logan come on there too, and finish out the X-Men. But so that there's that too.
Yeah, but it does create an interesting situation of where does Hulu lie in all this now? If Disney, hypothetically, let's say, starts releasing TVMA and R-rated movies onto Disney Plus, what's the point of Hulu now?
Yeah, that's the thing that I don't know. I've never been a Hulu subscriber, so I don't know how much the ownership lies in which different places, and if everything Hulu just gets assimilated into Disney eventually, or if it just becomes like kind of like a dormant platform. That I don't know what's going to happen with that.
Right, yeah, it's a super interesting thing since Hulu has kind of been Disney's home for everything that's not appropriate for Disney Plus. Outside of, I would say, this is my opinion though, that The Simpsons was one of the most interesting choices, and I understand why it was put on Disney Plus because of The Simpsons just as a brand and all that. But content wise, it really is pushing that TV-14. It's really not kid friendly for a big chunk of their episodes, and so seeing it go to Disney Plus was a very interesting thing. And I know a lot of people were thinking it was going to go to Hulu, but that's a lot of money on Disney, especially to not fully own Hulu to allow The Simpsons to live on there. It made sense for it to be on Disney Plus.
Yeah, and like I said, I just think it just branches out and allows us to get more stuff. And who knows, maybe like, I don't know if it's anticipation for Moon Knight, because Moon Knight seems a little bit edgier, or if we get any other content down the road that kind of rides that wavelength, we might get that. Who knows?
Yeah, considering they haven't announced what Moon Knight's going to be rated, because the Netflix shows are launching on the 16th and Moon Knight does not launch till the end of March, I would not be surprised if somehow the show ends up with a TVMA rating, because Kevin Feige will not stop talking about the fact that this show is like gritty, it's dark, it's violent, and all these things they don't really match that TV-14 rating.
Right, and that would definitely be something, kind of spice it up from the existing Marvel shows that I've been totally looking for, and I would be so happy if they actually did that.
Yeah, so to cap this off, let's just talk about, what is the future of this streaming wars that's going on? Do you think all of these streamers are still going to be here, 5-10 years from now?
I don't know. Like, I think so, because I think it's just going to be like kind of like an evolution of the movies. We had, MGM making their own stuff. Sony is making their own stuff. Granted, Sony doesn't have a streaming service yet. Warner Brothers was making movies. Disney's making movies, so it's just kind of like an extension of that. So we're gonna have like the whole streaming sides, and you get to pick your poison there, and then we also have the filmmaking, the cinema stuff, and you can choose what big movies you want to see there. And it might be a little bit more event heavy focused, and we might not see as many indie films as we've talked about many times on the show. But I think they're going to be here to stay, and they're going to keep fighting to making the best content possible, which if you want to talk about putting effort in and really trying to make a big move, we got to talk about what Amazon's doing in September. Lord of the Rings, most expensive show ever to date, tapping into a big audience, big IP, and already multiple seasons ordered. Even Halo already has a season 2. I don't even know if it's going to be good, but it just goes to show you that Paramount and these studios are serious about this stuff, and they're not messing around.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, it's very interesting to see the evolution of the TV shows that now we're looking at. Amazon paid billions just for the rights, and now they're spending $1 billion, I heard, per season. So, you're looking at $250 million an episode almost. And, it's crazy. Like, that's a lot, period, the end. Like, that is... Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how much money they're spending, and if it's not successful, that's a lot of money down the drain too. But they're betting on it working, and having access to, everyone said this for a long time, but the next Game of Thrones, something that will captivate audiences in a way that we haven't seen since then. I mean, I would say The Mandalorian gets pretty close sometimes, but on that scale, I just don't feel it yet.
Right, and the other big competition would be actually Game of Thrones itself. We got House of Dragon launching, and then I also saw a headline today that I think Walking Dead's launching the 5th spinoff with Negan and Maggie.
Yep, heard that one.
So I mean, if you're a huge fan of that world, you got lots of new content courtesy of AMC Plus. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, all these different IPs are like really branching out and digging deep. If you're a fan and they want you to stick around, they want to dive into these worlds, and they're paying the money up front to hopefully deliver a quality product that you can enjoy for a long time to come.
Yeah, and the last thing is, do you think that consumers are going to become a little more picky? Like, 1 month they'll pay for Netflix, they'll cancel at the end of that month, and then they'll swap to a different service to watch, a different show. Do you think it's going to be, consumers owning all of these services, or do you think it's really going to be a jumping ship, whenever they feel like it? And I feel like maybe that will be the future of this.
I mean, it's definitely a possibility too. I'm definitely getting more picky about what I'm spending, when it would cost me, a couple months of a streaming service to fill up my gas tank right now. But yeah, and I mean, we've already seen, people there's a lot of leeching going on, and we'll just have one account and we'll have all the different profiles, we'll just pay it all, split it, and everybody can watch Amazon. I think Amazon has come out and said that they know that that's a thing, but it's just more viewers for them and almost free advertising, because if you're sacrificing a couple subscribers but you have more people watching it, more people talking about social media, bigger impact on the pop culture, and then that just drives more subscribers anyway.
Yeah, and I've heard this from Disney as well. I've heard it from Netflix. They've all said this idea that, yeah, we know what you're doing, and there are ways to stop it. It's more of a, are they willing to deal with the pushback of implementing it. And, what if it doesn't implement correctly? What if people who pretty much are, they live by themselves, let's say, they keep getting locked out of their account because the stupid thing keeps thinking that it's not them. And so I do understand why they're very hesitant to, try and put these restrictions in place, because it can make a very unfriendly user experience, and it could possibly even lead to like people canceling over the fact that it doesn't work properly, or the idea is that everyone will get their own. Well, what happens when they don't? And instead, you just lose subscribers, because now that one person is paying the whole bill and they're not going to pay it either.
Right, yeah, and I just would not want to be the streaming be the first streaming service to make that change. If Netflix did that, like, oh my god, I got to pay for Netflix now. Like, screw that. I'm going to Amazon. But then if Netflix does it and they take the blowback, then it would be like more okay if the other ones did, because Netflix already took the blunt from the hit. But until then, yeah, I think they don't really care. They just understand that it's a necessary evil, and they're kind of working with it anyways.
Yeah, I think that wraps it up.
Yeah, we had a good talk, about the streaming wars. We want to know, like, what streaming services are you all about? Like, what do you like? We got so many these days. We got Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, HBO Max, Stars, Apple TV, Paramount Plus. So many to choose from now. Which one are you into? What shows are you looking forward to? Let us know. Maybe we'll tune in. But that's going to do it for us this week. We will see y'all next week. Something brand new. Peace out.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Timebreaker Podcast.
If you did enjoy, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe, and make sure to ring that notification bell for new episodes every Wednesday.
See you next week.